Get an exclusive glimpse into what it's truly like to work in tax technology in this episode through a candid and authentic discussion with Alexandra Kobakhid, who used to be head of tax tech at Uber, which sounds like a pretty cool role to me, and is now tax technology director at Fonoa. You're listening to the Tax Professionals Podcast, episode 81, and episode 3 of the sub-series Tax Role Insights, giving you insiders' insights into different types of tax roles available to us as tax professionals.
Welcome to the Tax Professionals Podcast, the podcast dedicated to helping you improve your tax career. Here's your host, Jack Bonehill.
Hi everyone, and welcome to this episode. Do you know what tax tech is and what tax tech specialists do? I had a vague idea, but it turns out I didn't know the half of it, and what I thought tax tech specialists do was nothing more than a guess. But I was interested, intrigued, and I'm a big fan of technology, so I thought I'd probably like working in this area. Alexandra Kobakhid, this episode's guest, has been working in this space now for almost 8 years. He started working in tax tech before the current hype that's picking up around it now. He moved into it after working as an indirect tax specialist for some time, starting his career at Deloitte. In the episode, you'll hear about the role of a tax tech specialist, what they do, how tax technology benefits businesses, and how it could benefit you as a tax professional. You'll also hear about the high demand for people to work in tax technology, which is great if you're interested in working in this space, the work-life balance for tax tech people, a bit about what you can expect to earn, and Alexandra's advice if you're interested in becoming a tax tech specialist. Rough timings for each section of the episode can be found in the show notes for this episode at thetaxprofessionalspodcast.com/TTPP81 or in the details section of the episode within your podcast player of choice. The link to the show notes, thetaxprofessionalspodcast.com/TTPP81 is the only link you need to remember, as all other links mentioned throughout the episode are included in there. I'm a big believer that we are responsible for our own tax career, progression and development, but that we should have the resources available to us to do this. I'm always keeping an eye out for gaps in these resources so that I can fill that gap. Obviously, there are other podcast episodes which cover a range of topics now, but on top of this, I provide training courses purely for people who work in tax, and these are focused on helping you develop vital skills to succeed in your tax career. I use real stories, real examples, exercises, and questions to keep the training interesting, hopefully keep it interesting anyway, and to help you implement what you've learned and actually improve quicker than what you otherwise would. My next masterclass is in September this year. This will be the Tax Research Masterclass, which is designed to teach you how to undertake quality tax research at work. Basically, find the answer to any tax question. It also teaches you how to document your findings, so that you can reassure your colleagues that you've done a complete and thorough job, saving them precious time and put an appropriate note on file. I'm delivering the Tax Advice Masterclass in November, provided I have enough interest, that is. And this one, as you can probably guess, is all about how to provide quality tax advice, the type of advice that clients want to pay for. Head on over to thetaxprofessionalspodcast.com/masterclasses for more details, including how you can enroll. If, like me, you're interested in knowing what you're worth in terms of salary, then get in touch with James from the Tax Recruitment Company to benchmark what you're currently on. From his interaction with many different businesses and tax professionals, he has current knowledge of salary rates based on experience and specialism. Speaking with James could help you to negotiate a pay rise or determine it's time to find a new role. Contact details for James can be found in the show notes for this episode at thetaxprofessionalspodcast.com/TTPP81, or you can book a chat with him by heading on over to thetaxprofessionalspodcast.com/salary chat. So get in touch with James to benchmark your salary or to discuss potentially available roles, particularly if you work in corporation tax, as he's currently recruiting for many roles in this area. Without further ado, let's get to the episode. Hey, do you mind telling us a little bit about you and your tax career?
So my career is roughly 15 years. It's not that long, it's about 15 years. But for the last 2, I've been working with Fonoa, which is a tax technology company. And just to say it right off the bat, I ended up in both tax and tech by pure accident. It's not a career that I necessarily chose. The background is that I graduated during the 2008 financial crisis. I really struggled to find a job. It was near on impossible. Grades were solid, but very few companies were willing to essentially just take on any new graduates at that time. Without any practical experience, the job market was pretty much flooded with great talent. So essentially, I joined the Big Four initially in Malta into a really, really phenomenal team. Later moved into the UK, London, and in both places, I was specialized in indirect tax specialist. I spent 4 years in the Big Four and later was seconded into a client, again, as a VAT manager, a VAT specialist. And it was a secondment that I didn't return from. I really liked the experience. It was a really big eye opener into how different industry and practice is. And I mean by that, how different it is to work in-house versus what it's like to work in the Big Four. And I just felt it was for me. It's not for everyone, but for me, it was that I felt in the right place. So the opportunity to travel internationally was really, really well. Again, it was an oil and gas company that I worked for, and a lot of the time was spent not only in the UK, but also further afield, mainly the UAE and Malaysia. Loved the team there as well. And then in 2015, there was an opportunity to join another company that was up and coming called Uber. By 2015, it was very well known. It was rapidly scaling. It was a company disrupting the passenger transportation space. And I was offered to join the tax team there. There was only about 4 or 5 individuals that were in the tax team back then. And I joined as an indirect tax specialist as well. And from there on, I slid, I would like to say I chose, but I literally, I slid into technology because it was necessary. You just have to do more with less or whatever you have. And that's where technology fits in. So that's really where I got into tech. And within a few years, it didn't start this way, but we built up a tax technology team there. And I headed that up for our global operations from the tax team. I lived out in Amsterdam as well. So that's where the international HQ was located. And after 6 years, which brings us 2 years ago, I left Uber to join a great number of colleagues in a company called Fonoa, which is, again, scaling through the tax technology space right now. And I feel like it's where I'm adding value today. That's more the professional career.
Yeah. You're not in-house anymore, technically, are you? You've gone back onto the other side, but does it feel like an in-house role?
It does, because it's just working so closely with the companies and in a space where there aren't that many practitioners still. So it does feel like it does feel like in-house. And throughout the career, it's making those friends, those connections, that network. I tend to speak quite a bit to those individuals which I've met along the way and try and support them. So it also within their in-house challenges.
Yeah.
So yeah, it still feels, you're right. It's moved across over into the other side, but it doesn't feel like that, actually.
Yeah. You've actually traveled around a lot, haven't you? Like, where were you when you graduated? Where were you looking for jobs back then?
Anywhere that was willing to take
Oh,
me.
really?
So I was in Edinburgh when I graduated, sending CVs left, right, and center. Background was economics and law, and hoping to go down to the city or into joining one of the financial institutions down there. And that literally did not play out well. It was perhaps the worst time to be looking for a role in finance in 2008.
So tax didn't even cross your mind at all then at the time?
It did, because I remember somebody mentioning to me, do you know, like one of the things that you still need during an upturn and a downturn? I was just looking at that. And tax came up. Says, well, if people are still looking for tax, it's not the most exciting. Frankly, sorry, you wanted an honest answer, right? It's not the most exciting space, but I'll join it. I'll try it out. And I was very fortunate in that there was this team in Deloitte in Malta led by a guy called Conrad Cassatrigiani who took me on board. It was literally a kind of a shot in the dark for them as well as for me, but that really clicked. I was very, very fortunate to get into that team. It was probably one of the best decisions, but I think it was one of the best life decisions I've made so far.
Yeah.
Was joining the team, and the individuals that really played a big role in shaping my knowledge and understanding of the space were really, really good.
Yeah. Most people, to be fair, I don't think choose to go into tax. I think I was probably one of the few people who had it as like one of my top 2. I actually wanted to be an actuary. That was my first choice after uni, if you know what that is. Not many people do. Yeah, that was my first choice. Tax was second. Then actually probably for the first 3 years of working in tax, whilst I enjoyed it, I was still almost trying on the side to get an actuary role. But because I'm the opposite of you, I definitely don't want to travel around. I like to stay in one place. I wasn't willing to move out of Birmingham, and it was almost impossible to get a job in Birmingham as an actuary. So I stuck tax out. And to be fair, I'm glad I did now, to be fair.
Any regrets about your choice? So you think that you stuck it, right? It's a good decision that you've made across over in hindsight.
Yeah, definitely no. It probably took me a while to get here. Everyone thinks the grass is always greener, right? You always think there's something better. And I definitely suffered with that for a while. Probably up until I was about manager grade, to be honest, where I finally was like, right, I'm just sticking this out now. I'm enjoying it. I like it. It's good pay, good progression, etc. Let's just carry on with it. And if for some reason I dislike it in the future, then I can always move then. But yeah, definitely glad I stuck it out now, because it seems to be going well anyway. I wouldn't be able to do the podcast, would I, if it wasn't working in tax?
No, but you're right. One of the things I probably should take back is I said that initially and it's because of the stigma around the space, is that it's known as this unexciting field that people would join, right? And that's probably why it doesn't cross my mind. It wasn't one of the first ones that crossed my mind, but that's a complete misconception. It's
Oh yeah,
probably
it is.
it's one of the most interesting, intellectual, challenging spaces there is to be.
But even now, because I've recruited quite a few people, most of the people I've recruited either came through applying for a different role for my employer, like forensics or something like that, forensics accountancy, and then not getting that job and being put forward to us, or literally just like applying for they just saw a random advert for our role, applied for it, but weren't really looking for tax roles more generally. So definitely a problem. It's making recruiting more difficult, particularly at graduate level.
Yeah, I can imagine.
I was going to say, so how does tax technology help business, and what's like the value add of doing it, and why should businesses be thinking about it?
That's a great question. So if I could start how I think about tax tech, right? Let me just frame your question. There's two ways that you can think about it. There's some tax technology which has nowadays become essential. So it's, if you want a slang word, call it necessitech. And it's technology that you cannot operate without. And what I'm talking about here, there's things like e-invoicing. So it's not really a choice. For businesses operating internationally right now, and particularly within Europe, have to, in many cases, report their transactions to governments or to produce digital documents like e-invoicing, etc., which are mandated by law. You just don't get a choice to do that, right? So you need people who are able to do that. And then there's the second question is there's other tax and technology out there, which is you still have an option whether or not you want to use. And in that second bucket, it becomes quite interesting to say, okay, the way that you really want to implement this, and this is something that I carried on from the industry days, is there's essentially four goals. One, they're all to do with saving money for the business, right? But one is to make existing processes cheaper. So something that you're doing from a tax perspective, that if you deploy technology, you can make it less, it costs less. There's a second one is you make it faster, it's just freeing up resources to do more elsewhere, which is again, just making things less costly for the business. And the third one is the business needs to think about it because you have to make things more accurate, or you can make things more accurate, removing those human errors that can creep up if you do things manually. And by deploying certain types of technology, you remove that. Again, the cost benefit here is that it's reduced penalties, reduced audits that you spend there. And there's a fourth one, but it's often forgotten about. It's to make work more enjoyable by improving job satisfaction. And essentially the way that ties back to the business goals is that you reduce churn. You don't hire the best people in the space to perform manual, mundane, repetitive, soul-destroying tasks. And that's a sure way to lose your best individuals within the company. So if you summarize, you make things cheaper, faster, more accurate, or more enjoyable. And that's really what tax tech is there for. And that's just my view. I'm imagining there's different ways that you can look at the space, but this is the kind of my view on the tax tech space.
Yeah, I think the first three you talked about, the saving money, time, increasing accuracy, they're all like pretty obvious, right? But for some reason, I'm sure you've seen this as well, but when it comes to tax and any like software or programs that we have, they just look like they were made in like the 70s. Why do they just look so old fashioned and like not slick, not new, not professional looking? Do you know what I mean? Do you think that as well?
Absolutely. I mean, this is one of the reasons why I jumped ship across over to Fonoa, is because I think that's exactly the kind of things that we wanted to change. You put a lot of human-centric design, you focus on the problem first, rather than using it just as a tool, right? You look at how do individuals interact with this kind of technology? What is really the problem they're trying to solve? And the underlying problem. So I think this space has really been lacking a lot of attention from good product over the years. And this is product user experience, user interface design, those kind of disciplines have just not been giving much attention to tax tools.
Yeah.
Which is so unnecessary, because everybody has to do it. And then nobody enjoys doing this stuff. So you have to figure out how to get this done faster, right? That's one thing. How can people use the tools? How to make it more understandable? These are already very complicated space, right?
Yeah.
Tax it's not easy for individuals or for the practitioners working in it. So trying to make it more understandable is definitely it hasn't been happening.
So it's more understandable, just looking nicer as well. It sounds silly, but if you look at something that looks like it's from the 70s, like straight away, like I enjoy it less because I just feel like I'm using a clunky old piece of software. Whereas if it looks modern and recent, it just, for me at least anyway, because I do like tech, generally speaking, it just makes it feel nicer to use than it does otherwise.
Well, I think it's changing now. I think with enough disruption in the space of people coming in and starting to create products that people want to use, not have to use, I think that's been a
Yeah.
big change.
Yeah.
And I think it's going in the right direction now by applying all of the disciplines that have existed in let's say consumer products for a long, long time already. Now applying that into the field of taxation, you'll see a lot more positive change in this space.
Yeah.
But also the other aspect of this, right? There's been a lot of very little investment into it, and I think let me give you another observation. Taxes usually sits on the cost side of a business, so you're not a revenue. Typically within an in-house function, you're not a revenue generating function.
Yeah.
The best that you can usually do is avoid penalties. You can optimize. You can support your business, but at the end of the day, you're not there. You're not billing out to clients. You're not generating revenue unless you're sitting in the Big Four or one of the practice, right? But when you're in house, it's a cost side to the business, and that brings with it a number of different challenges as well. So your businesses typically try and scale. They want to grow their products, right? So investment into your technology that you're using as a cost function isn't really the main focus. It's been quite challenging for
Yeah.
tax departments to get the budgets that they really need in order to be able to get the tools that are actually leading within this space.
Yeah, that makes sense from one flip side of it. I suppose on the other, I think of just for some reason, I think tax has almost been left behind the times a bit. For whatever reason that is, it just feels like old fashioned compared to some other industries, maybe.
It is, and I think but the observation that I'm making here is that with the company certainly that we're working with, and I'm getting to observe right now, I think that's changing for the better.
Yeah.
For the better.
That's-
So there is more attention being paid into this. But the other point is that there's not that many specialists in this area right now.
Well, I didn't know much about it, honestly, until we spoke before doing this episode together. Like, I've seen that the CIOT's got a tax technology diploma, I think it is now.
Yeah.
I've seen jobs advertised for it, but I had a vague idea what it was about, but I didn't really know any detail about it until we spoke.
Yeah, and perhaps even to answer your question more bluntly, right? You said to me, what's the value add and why should companies be thinking? I give you the framework, but let me give you one kind of practical example. With the right tech in place, especially tax technology in place, you are not a blocker to your business, which is probably the biggest reason why people should be paying attention to this area. What I mean by that is that in some industries, and one of them I worked in, if you're not first into a market, you're pretty much last. Sorry, I'm quoting Ricky Bobby there from a film, but if you're not first, you're last. And to be first into a market, also you have to consider being compliant as you operate within that market. If you cannot get to compliant and you're delaying your launch of a particular service and you're slowing down your business, then you are slowing down the revenue aspect of your business as well.
Yeah, of course.
So the idea is, why should people be paying attention to it? Because it can become a competitive advantage.
Mm.
And I don't mean from the optimization, just from a go-to-market. You can just be in the markets faster. You can scale your products faster. You can launch new lines of businesses faster. If you're in a very competitive space, it can make the difference between you being successful in a market or not. So it does make a hell of a big difference.
Yeah. What do you think that are the biggest misconceptions that people have about working in tax technology and what that is? Like, what common things do you come across?
That you have to be a tax professional and a technology professional. I think that's it. I think one of the misconceptions that you have to write the code. I think the two traits I find are the most important for, let's say, low maintenance, intelligent individuals. If you find those individuals, natural curiosity, probably more important than all of those, that you have the desire and ability to go and try something new, willingness to adapt, because this space is changing all the time, right? The technology you used 5 years ago is not the technology we're using today. It changes much faster than actually we would like. So natural curiosity, try and go and experiment, figure out what is out there. But coupled with that, you have to have this execution mindset. So kind of stopping to procrastinate and going ahead and doing things rather than just wishing it would happen by itself. You have to be able to have that curiosity and the execution mindset to be able to do it. I'm not going to downplay the profession, but you can learn the tax side. It is complicated, but you can learn it. But what you can't change is the attitude of the individuals in this space.
Yeah.
What the danger is you learn one form of technology and you stick to it for the next 10, 20, 30 years. it's not possible right now. You have to be able to accept that this stuff is going to change. The tech is going to change.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of smart tax and technology and smart tax professionals and technology specialist developers out there that can complement the skills that you don't have. So yes, it does. I'm not going to say it doesn't help. It helps tons, but the kind of the two things I would say that you need is natural curiosity and an execution mindset.
Yeah. To be fair, I think with any tax job, having natural curiosity helps, because
Yeah.
if you can be super smart and whatever, but if you come across, so let's say a client's asking you a question and you don't know the answer straight away and you have to go and research it. If you're not naturally curious, you're going to do a real lazy job of that and probably not get to the right answer, or not at least be 100% sure that you got to the right answer. Whereas someone who's curious will make sure, I think, generally speaking, that they get to the right answer and that they can prove it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. And I think that's what I found within the team that we created within Uber. I think out of the, let's say, 10 individuals, we had 3 tax professionals. The other 7 were either PhD mathematicians, background in stochastics, somebody in machine learning, another data analyst, and a data scientist. So those were the kind of personalities that were there. Did they know tax? No. Did they know it after 6 months to become dangerous? Yeah, hell yeah. These guys can pick it up already. In the same way that for those of us who came from not a technical background, the curiosity that those individuals showed meant that they learned how to code in Python or whatever, write SQL queries within the systems that had to contain the information to be able to extract the information out of them. They developed that over time. It's not that everybody is 100% knowledgeable in this space as soon as they do in the job. There's a lot of stuff that you learn on the job, especially learning about data sets and things like that. So that's where the natural curiosity, as you say, comes in. So absolutely, 100% agree with you there as well. That's not just in the technology space, but also in the tax space, you need that.
Yeah. Interesting actually to hear about the split between tax people and non-tax people in the tax tech team there at Uber.
Yeah, it was, and even now within Fonoa, right? Out of the individuals I'm working with today, within the focusing core tax technology, you have a lot of technology people because tax is a subject, but you can't get away without having the technology folks involved. You need super smart developers. You know why this place is really difficult is because it's kind of a marriage between 2 very technical areas, which are riddled with their own jargon. So trying to understand both at the same time is going to be a challenge, and it's easier just to have one or the other. It's definitely helpful.
Yeah. Just on that then, actually, because you're right, there's a lot of jargon in tax, and I'm sure equally there's a lot in coding and programming and that type of thing. Then, like, how do you cross that barrier to make sure that you're understanding what they're saying and they're understanding what you're saying?
Oh, that's a really good question. That's actually the biggest problem that we found working between those 2 teams is the miscommunications that can happen within the Uber side. The tax tech team was effectively an interpreter between the product managers, the developers, and the tax team. They essentially translated between the 2 teams by understanding where both of them are coming from. And it was fascinating. I remember some of the howling mistakes I made when I first joined. It's like completely misunderstanding how software development life cycles work. The fact is that some things that look very easy on screen to change are actually very, very difficult, and vice versa. And trying to understand that to begin with, it was just a very steep learning curve, right? You have to get it right. You annoyed a lot of our technology teams or a lot of our developers by asking them to make changes last minute, thinking like, yeah, but it's just this wording change. Surely you can do that. And then understanding that the level of code review they have to jump through and all the hoops that they have to do, and the fact that it's not as easy as it looks was kind of a wake up call. So there was the tax tech team was essentially tasked with learning how both sides work, identifying which problems can be resolved using technology, and importantly, which ones can't. By the way, that's a really important point. Sorry, let me just underscore this. Just because you have tax tech doesn't mean you have to automate or throw technology at absolutely everything. There's a cost benefit analysis to it all. But that's where the technology team came in. The tax tech team came in, is to try and be the crossroads between finance, tax, tech, and other stakeholders.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So then, because you've now worked in tax tech since Uber, which is probably been, 4 to 6 years now of tax tech?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We didn't, there was, of course, the there was technology aspects of how to configure a tax engine working with fintech colleagues, because tax tech itself didn't really exist. It's as a formal term or as a team. It doesn't, just because a company doesn't have a tax tech team or doesn't have something formally, doesn't mean it doesn't have the individuals within the company that are doing this stuff. There is somebody who is doing this. It's just not formally acknowledged as such.
Okay,
Yeah.
well, with that in mind then anyway, so because you've had a few different roles now, formally branded as a tax tech role,
Yeah.
and I'm sure they're very different. Like what have your roles been like? I suppose the two really to look at here are Fonoa and Uber, right?
So within Uber, I was an indirect tax. I joined as an indirect tax specialist, indirect tax manager, then senior manager, and then head of tax technology. And again, specifically within Uber, it was one, identifying the areas of inefficiency within the company that needed to be removed. That could be removed with the help of technology. It didn't mean that we had to automate absolutely everything. We figured out which tools exist either within or the knowledge which exists already within the company that we can solve using tech. So making things, again, how can we make this return more accurate? How can we can reduce the risk of this number being wrong? Then somebody's spending way too much time compiling these kind of returns. How can we automate that process? What tools can we use? Can we use a script? Can we use another tool like, I don't know, Alteryx or Tableau or something along those lines to accelerate that process? Or do we have to build a new tool right from the ground up or buy something from, let's say, the big four? That was, those are the questions that we were trying to answer within Uber. The challenge there was, and again, this is the transition into Fonoa, was when answering those questions, we weren't the only company that was asking this. And before leaving for Fonoa, I think our team was 10 people with 12 people full-time in tax tech, but also that's not counting any of the engineers or any of the fintech people. If you throw that in, FTE full-time employees, it's probably over close to 100 for the company. And recognize that it was almost like building a power plant within an organization rather than drawing power from a single source. Me, and I wasn't the only one, quite a few people left and created Fonoa to what it is today, which is essentially building those same products, building those tax engines, e-invoicing solutions, or tax number validation tools, which most companies try and build in-house themselves, but building them so that others can use them. That's it. So most of my time nowadays within Fonoa is spent with the product teams, helping them understand the underlying problem that they're trying to solve for, working with our network to figure out, a lot of the time is phoning up friends and asking them for input into products to make sure that we absolutely get the problem right and that the solution that we build, it has a product market fit. That's it. That's a lot of that is trying to really understand the root causes of issues. And it's a really fun part of the job, by the way, because sometimes you have a hypothesis and you think you know what the real problem is until you start speaking to the people in the market and say, no, that's not why we're doing this kind of thing. Right? This is the real reason why we're doing something. That's a really interesting part of the role.
Yeah.
Working with the product teams.
So when you're at Uber, then it sounds like sometimes you built the product internally, and sometimes a product might have already existed, and therefore you bought it from someone else. I think you mentioned Big Four as an example. So what was it? Both then was it when you were in Uber? Obviously now you develop the products and essentially sell them to in-house teams, I'm guessing. But when you're at Uber, were you doing both?
It was both, yeah. It whatever worked. There was a very objective sort of analysis. Is this value spent for us to build this in-house? The first question was, is this a problem that needs to be solving? Then when the answer is yes, we have to do something. Then the question is, okay, what do you do? Can we solve it using technology we can just buy in that matches our use case perfectly? If the answer to that is no, okay, what's it going to cost to build it? And then it was a comparative analysis saying, okay, can we build it better than somebody else can build it for us? Because all of this stuff, the thing is that this is really expensive individuals that you're throwing at the particular task. And that those individuals, let's say we were fortunate within the likes of Uber and then my peers also within other tech companies, you do have engineers on staff that you can try and divert their attention. But realistically, you want those people focusing on revenue generating activities for the company, not, as I say, for this cost function inside the organization. So yeah, it was really a very carefully considered case whether you want to build or buy.
Yeah.
And a lot of the times you used to say, yeah, if somebody has a solution, it's going to be much more efficient, much cheaper for us just to buy it.
Yeah. So it sounds anyway, if I was following correctly there, you always thought first, is there a solution out there that works on your Uber? And if there was, you just buy it. And then if one didn't exist, you then think, well, should we build it ourselves or should we get someone else to build it for us?
Yeah, it had to fit our. I mean, there's a bit more nuance, but exactly as you say, is there something that fits our use case? Then let's get it, because it's a lot faster. In many cases, it's a lot faster to build to not to have to build it, because with building stuff comes the maintenance aspect, which people often ignore.
Yep.
You don't just build something and forget about it. It's a probability of when it's going to break down, what you're going to do with it, and if you build that stuff in house, you are essentially held hostage by the individual who build it, because because turnover headcount is a natural thing. It's going to happen, and once those individuals leave, you probably don't really understand how those systems were developed or how those tools were created and why. It's a really dangerous situation to be in.
But so if they leave, then if something breaks or you need to change it, then that would be really difficult to do.
Yeah, yeah. If anybody wants a tip to never have to be threatened with their job security, is build something internally.
Well, yeah, that's valuable.
Yeah, that's valuable, and then you're pretty much irreplaceable. That's a really dangerous situation for us to be in. So yes, for that reason, it was very carefully considered before we decide to do something ourselves, whether or not we would do it, because you have to consider this.
Yeah, of course.
And your entire company has hired you to make that decision objectively, saying, is this actually good for us? I mean, the company, is it good for the company or not?
With both Uber then and Fonoa. So were you involved in implementation at Uber? I'm guessing you probably were, if you were, I suppose, helping to either get them created or to source it and then get it to work.
Yep.
Yeah, same for Fonoa. Like, how do you get involved there? Do you help other businesses who buy your products with implementation, or do you get a member of your team or something to deal with that?
Definitely a member of the team. Like this stuff has become very, very specialized. I would have historically supported and I'm trying to test the use cases I can help in the testing side, right? So when you're doing an implementation or integration, you have integration specialists that can do the work. They know their systems inside out, our systems inside out. And typically from a client side, you have they would go in, they would understand how the client systems work, what their architecture is, what the limitations are, and support the client into essentially implementing the technology. You need specialists for it. Somebody like me who's now more of a generalist definitely shouldn't be getting involved in that space.
Yeah.
So but in terms of testing for the outcome, to understand whether or not what has been implemented works and it works as a desired outcome, then yes, that's something that we can still do. Yeah.
So at Fonoa then, what is your main responsibility now? Is it like development of the products, or is it like sales in a way? Like, how would you describe your like main responsibility now?
So now I'd love to say the word evangelism, because it captures both of the side. But on the one hand, it is to help our teams understand the products that we're building. There are some areas where I do still have the specialist knowledge, but on the other hand, it's to helping our teams understand the problem, the root cause, connecting them with our contacts and clients to really understand that what we're building is the right thing. So I work a lot with the product team. I nowadays work a lot with the marketing team and sometimes with the sales, but less so in helping them to spread the word about what the company is doing in a way that the tax professionals out there would understand. The other aspect of the job, and I'd say evangelism, is supporting colleagues both within government, but also within the OECD, to understand the areas and the challenges that come within this space specifically. And so it's really been a massive change in this area. Actually, the level of consultation that governments are doing now has increased, which is a really positive sign. They are coming to ask for professional opinions, but not a memo in that sense, but to understand what are the problems that people are facing in this area. For example, what are the challenges facing the platform or sharing and gig economy? Why do they see non-compliance in one area? And quite often it's got a non-obvious root cause, which is often explained through consultations with the parties involved.
Yeah.
So I still support on those areas, on those fronts. And that's most of the day job, let's put it that way.
Yeah. It sounds to me like, anyway, working in tax tech, there's a lot of like variety within that space that you can, in terms of the type of work that you can do, because it sounds like you now don't really get involved with the nitty gritty in the day to day anymore. But if you wanted to, I'm sure you could, right? Just that you've taken a different path.
I do still. So for example, if you're trying to figure out the only bit I don't get involved in is the coding. You have world-class engineers and developers who do that part. But working together, for example, you have product managers who need to understand the problem, design the solutions and then create the market fit. You then have what you were mentioning, integration specialists, that these are the people who help integrate the systems. They have a really solid understanding of both the tax side, but also the system side, how, let's say, APIs work, what system the client is using, how they work. You also have then the developers who write the actual code, and they are pretty much the uncredited geniuses and the magicians behind the scenes. And then of course you have the tax people, the core tax individuals. The reason why you still need core tax professionals is because a lot of the products have to be maintained and accurate during during their use, during their lifetime, right?
Mm.
And you need those individuals to know exactly when things change, how legislation changes, what is changing around the world, and how it impacts your systems, your clients, etc.
Yeah.
So those are also individuals that we work with, that they have to understand, okay, the easy example, the VAT rate has changed in this country or is about to change in 3 months. What should we do? Well, we have to update our systems. We have to inform the clients and see that they agree that they want their tax engine to be updated, right? Things like that. And that's a very very easy, high level example, but it becomes more and more complicated than that as well.
Just a reminder to benchmark your salary, find out what you're worth, or to discuss available tax roles, then get in contact with James at the Tax Recruitment Company. His contact details can be found in the show notes for this episode at thetaxprofessionalspodcast.com/TTPP81 or by heading on over to thetaxprofessionalspodcast.com/salary chat. I think we've touched upon this a little bit already, but do other people who work in tax tech do completely different things to you? I think they do, right? Like,
Yeah.
could you move from working as a bog standard tax professional like I am, an advisor, and then essentially become like a tax coder? Do you think, is that something that you've seen happen, or do people who code tend to start with a coding background, and then people who start with a tax background tend to not touch it? Do you see, if you see what I mean?
Yeah, you're right. And so the kind of the situation you described does happen, but those individuals are rare as hen's teeth. So it does happen. I have seen them. They're very, very difficult to find. Usually what I found is that it's a lot easier for people with a tech background or a natural curiosity from that space to move a little bit closer to tax. They're not going to be full tax professionals. They'll know it to become dangerous, and know it enough to become dangerous. But for tax people already who are, let's say, VAT or finance professionals that have a affinity, a leaning towards data analytics, they become great tax technology specialists.
Mhm.
Those ones I've seen that have got a fondness for large numbers in the data sets and will play around with those data sets to their heart's content and figure out ways how they can extract more information in a more efficient way, then yeah, those individuals typically become great tax tech professionals in my view.
Yeah. I think what I quite like about it is that there's just so much scope to make what you want out of a tax technology role in a way. So you can pick and choose almost what you like, maybe not quite to that degree, but you can, to some extent anyway, pick and choose which parts you like and try and get a role or sell yourself as a person that can do those things that you want to do.
You can. I think you're sort of also approaching an interesting topic, that there are, how do I phrase this? People will view tax tech through their own kind of tinted glasses. So if you're working in transfer pricing, you'll view tax technology as helping you, for example, country by country reporting or compiling large files, right? Others working in VAT compliance space will typically view tax technology as something that helps them prepare VAT returns. Those who are working in advisory will want to have the latest information and information delivered to them in a way. So for example, like we would do it, we have tools which are constantly monitoring what's happening online on internet, feeding that information, sorting it for relevance, and then presenting it to the tax specialists in English, so translating it as well, compiling that and sifting out through what's relevant. So there's depending on where you sit within the tax team, you're going to view tax tech as very, very different. And then and as a result, you're right. You can you can move into technology and tax technology specifically from a number of different angles. And there's people, by the way, who work exclusively on digital reporting and e-invoicing. There's entire companies that are exclusively dedicated to that space. There's others who are dedicated exclusively to tax engines. So yeah, absolutely. You have very different approaches to this space.
I didn't even think until you just said, by the way, about the potential for almost like a news finder to get all the news for you, even if it's from different countries, and then feed it into you. Because I've spoken to someone before who is based in the UK, but they're expected to be able to deal with like Brazilian tax and
Mhm.
Norwegian tax and all this and that. And I remember saying to them, like, how do you even find the answer to that? Because it's not going to be in English.
Yeah.
They're going to have their legislation, their guidance in their language, which you don't speak. Like, how do you even start about finding the answer there? It sounds like some of this tech that you've got can help with that, because translation is one thing, right? I know translations are never perfect anyway, but certainly it would help. And then even finding the news in that different language already to feed it into them must be super helpful for people. Like, what businesses do you find that the most helpful? Like that.
Large multinationals, digital companies that have scaled incredibly quickly over the last few years, which with a global footprint and a tax team typically sitting in one or two jurisdictions. So US, Europe, and maybe an APAC if you have a third. But for them to be able to cover the whole globe with that type of knowledge is just impossible. So like,
Course, yeah.
so like I said, what we figured out is that, okay, we have different tools that can serve for this. It's a lady in our team called Nicole, and her team are incredible at this. So they figured out ways to essentially do a lot more with a smaller headcount just by leveraging tech. You have those individuals who are monitoring news sources all over the world in English, but they might be prepared in different languages. Just that we have translation tools and things. It's like think of it as like a Twitter feed. Every 2 minutes is a news update. The only thing that technology does is that it sifts it to figure out what is relevant for the customer and client base that we have.
Yeah. So
that
if you've got someone that's like dealing with, let's say, VAT, then you can make it filter just VAT articles, for example.
Exactly, and then do it even more than that. Let's say it's the VAT and digital economy tax rate change versus, and then try and figure out, is this a rumor? Is this actual fact? Is it something that's going to come into play? Is it an opinion piece that somebody's talking about? So because there's so much information out there that's being constantly produced at a global level, you just physically can't. You can hire an army of 500 people and run a tax center like that. That's one thing. Or you can hire a handful of individuals which have got international specialization, but then use technology to leverage their knowledge and apply that globally, which is, I think, a much more scalable way of doing it.
Well, yeah, cheaper overall, I'm sure, than hiring people.
It is. And that's essentially where it comes into it, and more accurate in many cases, because you can do this stuff instantly. Then relying on people will take time to read articles. I'm sure a lot of people would have been trying to use large language models up to today. They can see that these computers can do things that humans just can't at a speed that we just can't match. So the idea was to embrace those kind of changes and use them. And I think this is where we've ended up, is you can have a much smaller team being able to essentially cover the globe with news updates. But that's thanks to tech. That's one of the use cases, like you said. Large multinationals, global footprint, trying to stay on top of all of these changes would definitely benefit from this type of tech.
This makes sense to me now why I think, know Stephen Hodson quite well. Actually, yeah. Because I know that's pretty much exactly what he has to do with his indirect tax team.
It's crazy. It's so hard to stay on top of all these changes. I really don't envy some of those guys as they're trying to do this. And this has been a trend, right? Historically, you would have teams that are sitting in multiple different locations that are responsible for that market. With these digital companies and, say, even gaming platform, digital economy space, you have a team that is sitting in one jurisdiction. And you're, as a VAT person, you walk in and they say, thanks very much. You're a tax specialist or in direct tax, whatever it may be. Now you're looking after the world. These countries are completely different. There is, and language barriers just to start. Once you're able to read, then you have to understand the nuances of the local legislation, which is really difficult to do. So I definitely don't envy Steve.
Yeah. So I know you've already touched on this already as well then, but like, apart from natural curiosity, in terms of like particular skills, like what type of skills do people need, and even knowledge maybe, to work in tax tech?
Yeah. So this, and I don't want to say it depends, but okay, it does depend. If you want to manipulate large data sets, if you like working with data, then knowing SQL, like how to a query language, how to extract information from those databases is really important. Understanding how to read those databases is really, really critical. If you want to help to automate processes, you have tools such as Alteryx. You can learn how to code in Python to try and automate things for your departments. You can start from there. If you're into data visualization, there is, of course, Power BI and Tableau, but there's other tools that you can visualize data with. So it really depends which area you want to go into, but there are so many amazing, cool technologies that you can get your hands on these days, which can help you really boost your productivity.
Do some of it yourself by the sounds of it, as long as they learn how to code in those programs.
Yeah, the hardest thing is identifying the use cases and being open to different technologies, being open to solve the problem as well. My suggestion would be get as much awareness as to what is out there, what kind of technologies are going to be in use, what is already used. And I mentioned a couple of things, data visualization. Okay, check Tableau and Power BI. If you want to look at process automation, have a look at Alteryx. There are some free alternatives to those tools as well. But yeah, just getting into get your hands dirty in this space. Try and do something. Find a problem that a manual use case that you're trying to solve for, and try and use one of these tools to fix for it. It's great when you have actually something to work on with this area.
I suppose that's almost like the way to segue into tax tech is to dip your foot in on something small, right?
Yeah, just try it, I think, and then you'll quickly figure out if it's for you or not. My introduction to it, I was amazed at the skill of some of the people that I was working with who weren't in the tax tech side at the time. I couldn't find a problem. I couldn't solve it. It was one of my Excel spreadsheets. I just couldn't find where the bug in it was. A miscalculation was happening. And I remember approaching one of my colleagues saying, and he told me, no, you need to speak to this individual. And I remember them pointing within 30 seconds of staring at the sheet. They said, no, the problem's right here. And I realized this person was kind of a PhD mathematician.
Yeah.
I was like, what? And doing things which they could do significantly more. I remember begging the heads of the department saying, please, can we use this individual in a slightly different way? Because they can they can apply their skills in a completely different area, which they happily agreed to at the start of the tax tech team.
So like what type of businesses then take on like specialists like you, those who work in tax tech? Is it mainly Big Four and in-house, or are there like other places too?
All of them do nowadays. So if you're specializing, let's say, in optimizing kind of processes, yeah, you can work with the Big Four. They have a lot of clients that rely on them. You can go into large multinationals, which are also nowadays hiring specifically for tax technology teams that help optimize in-house. There is another area which is on the digital reporting and e-invoicing side. This is what I mean. That's the new trend that's coming in through Europe as well as internationally. If you're specializing in that, pretty much any company these days, in the next 5 years, you will find it very difficult to do business in Europe. If those legislation comes in, it's already hard to do business without doing digital reporting within Europe. But if you're joining large multinationals, then the digital reporting e-invoicing space is going to be quite, I don't want to say easy to find a job, but I think it's going to have a high demand for individuals to come and join those companies.
Yeah, I'm going to ask you this question. And I already know for you, it sounds like you work a lot based on every time we've spoken, like the amount of meetings you seem to have, the fact that you're traveling everywhere. But what is the work-life balance like working in tax tech? Are you like a bit of an anomaly with all the traveling and stuff, or is that standard for working in tax tech?
No, definitely an anomaly. I don't think you need to travel nearly as much as I do. I think part and parcel with the other aspects of the job, not the tax tech side. But you can, if you choose to, you can travel as much and be on site within those individuals and those teams who are trying to, let's say, automate or change a process. But the work-life balance is typically determined by the organization and its culture and the people around you. That's what I've found.
Yeah,
I am a bad person to ask this because I really enjoy working within it. That's the honest answer. The people I work alongside are equally passionate about the space. So for us, it doesn't feel like work.
Yeah.
And that's the real challenge. That you need to tear yourself away. You need to have a break at some point. But you can the stereotype of coders sitting late into the night trying to figure something out. There's an element of that in the tax technology space as well.
Yeah. So basically the whole spectrum of real good balance to awful because you love it so much.
It is. But you know what? Again, you want an honest answer. I started dabbling in technology because I wanted to work less. Not
okay.
more. I was annoyed at the time that it was taking to prepare for me specifically prepare VAT returns. And while working in oil and gas, I had this wonderful colleague, and I'll call her out. It says Maria Luke, who was an incredibly passionate individual about tax and technology, scolded me for not knowing enough about the space. So I had to pick up my game and I had to go back and learn how do I use Excel, how to use macros, what the hell is a pivot table, the basics to really begin with.
Yeah.
And then just start working from there. But essentially, once I realized, hold on, if I know this stuff, I actually don't need to work nearly as much as I have to. So in a way, tax tech was supposed to reduce the amount of hours that were being spent on these tasks, and to give time back so you can enjoy the other things in your day. So yeah, in a way, if you're good at the job, you shouldn't be working more. You
Does
should
that
be
mean you're
working
bad at
less.
the job? Is that what you're saying?
I hope not. Please don't say that. It's now that I'm doing it for other. I'll justify it. It's now I'm doing it for other people. That's why.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's funny how things come full circle and you end up doing the opposite of what you wanted to start with.
Well, the idea is that you've got so good at it that you need to do more of it, and just for different individuals. That's the thing.
And
if
you're
you
so much in demand, right? Everyone.
Yeah, no, I think it's a great place to be in right now. I think now the demand for those type of individuals is really high,
Yeah.
really, really high. Especially the ones that you mentioned, the people who can sit on both sides of that fence of tax and technology are just very rare.
Yeah. The reason I asked about that anyway is because I was kind of brought up around tech because my dad's always worked in IT.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I went to uni and did my master's degree, I quite enjoyed the coding elements of that. So I'm not like a coding noob. Like I know a bit about it because I can do
Yeah.
basic macros and stuff in Excel. And if I wanted to, I could figure out how to do more complicated ones by just figuring out what the functions and stuff are, etc. So to me, like it's something I would consider, basically, is what I'm saying.
Jack, sounds like you're in the wrong place. I'm just calling out that you would in which case make a very easy and swift transition into this space. It sounds like you need to give it a try.
Well, after some of the things you've said, I think what I'm going to do is try and use it more in our team now, and maybe try and create some things or find some tech that exists out there for some of our clients. That might be what I do, actually, because there's a lot I didn't know about, right? I knew the basics, like the stuff about the VAT stuff and invoices. Like I knew that type of technology existed and the use of it, but some of the other stuff you've mentioned, particularly like the finding of the news and that for different countries, I didn't even know that was a thing. Like, I know you said, by the way, that this answer is going to be, it depends and stuff, but like, just as a bit of an idea, an indication, like what is pay like working in tax tech, maybe compared to other tax roles that aren't tax tech?
Right now it's above out. If you take my observation is this, that if you're trying to work in tax tech, because of the lack of individuals within this space, you are remunerated proportionally, right? It's demand. It's this classic. It's demand and supply. There's not enough people in this space, especially within the next 3, 4, 5 years as digital reporting and e-invoicing starts to take off across Europe. You're going to find more and more people being demanded. Like solid practitioners in this space are going to be very much in demand.
Mm-hmm.
That's sort of my prediction. And as a result, with not enough people coming in, having both disciplines under their belt, both tax and technology, just unusual. I think you are an anomaly in this case. The fact that you've gone from kind of a mathematics background with ability to code into tax, I think that's rare. So as a result, I think you're going to find people the salaries reflecting that.
Yeah. So if you were to guess, I know this is a bit of pie in the sky, but what do you think like max earning potential could be working in tax tech?
God, I really don't know, Jack. I think I honestly don't know. And this is you know what? It's not that I don't want to answer. It's because I live in so many different markets right now. As I'm based out in Croatia.
Yeah.
That is different to what is in Amsterdam, which is completely different to what it is in the UK, which is different to Spain and Portugal. So I'm so cautious in answering that question.
You can earn a good salary anyway, is what I'm guessing.
Yes. I think you can be very, very happy with the financial situation. Yes.
I'm very happy with it. Have you practiced that line?
No, I haven't. I'm trying to say it honestly, I'm trying to say it in a way that represents what I'm thinking when I actually don't have a clue about this. Do you know what? I do have. That's not true. I do have a clue about this space, and it depends which side of you have average salaries across different markets, right? So this is how we often compile our business cases with the help of clients. There's build and buy decisions that I was mentioning earlier. One of the key components of that is looking how much a salary is for an individual that's going to do this work, where that individual is located, and how much time is going to be spent building it and then later on maintaining it. And again, comparing those individuals when they're in the tax tech side, the salaries are high. They are. Again, it's to do with the demand. These individuals are quite rare. So yeah, I think my best answer I can give you, irrespective of irrespective of the market that you're looking at, those individuals are earning more than average.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I'm only playing with you anyway.
All right.
So just to finish off then, like you have given some advice already about what people can do if they want to get a role in tax tech, but have you got like any other piece of advice at all around that in case there's people out there who do want to give it a go, who are really seriously considering it?
Yeah, absolutely. Speak to people who are in the space. There's not just me, but I do get periodically some really bright individuals who are reaching out, asking for tips, suggestions. They're not looking necessarily for roles, but they're saying, look, I've got the CV. How would you improve it? Should I do a course in this? Or should I go and speak to somebody else? So there's a lot of people that are trying to network. There's a lot of people who are trying to network in this space. And I think that's definitely one way of figuring this out. Go and speak to somebody who's working in this area, either in a Big Four or somebody that you might know, and ask them and their view and opinions on this space. I think that's the best tip that I can give
Yeah.
right now.
Yeah. So that's almost like a starting point. How do you start gearing yourself up or moving into a role, or at least considering it anyway? And then I'm guessing it's just the normal type of recruitment process, find a role, maybe use a recruiter, etc. Where should people go then to learn more about you, maybe get in contact? Like, where are the best places for people to go?
LinkedIn. Find me on LinkedIn. I'm pretty approachable across over there. If people want to connect with me, I'm very open to that. I just give them a health warning. I typically do post I try and make tax a little bit more interesting and exciting. So my posts are usually memes, gifts, and jokes of some sort. But if they can suffer that from a tax angle, then happy to connect with them on LinkedIn and yeah, conversations from there on.
You know what, though, actually, I've just realised your posts do not come up in my feed, because if you post a lot, I don't think I've ever seen a post from you come up in my feed. Not once.
Oh, really?
Yeah, how weird's that? Like, I know LinkedIn's meant to be weird for this stuff, but you don't necessarily.
Have you blocked me, Jack? Is that...
Maybe by accident.
Oh no, you probably saw the first one. You know, who's this? So a meme of it. Yeah, but that's usually I try and, like I said before, I think that people presume the space is very dry. I think it's incredibly funny and witty, some of the things that you can see through the tax lens. And as a result, me and our team, we usually post things with a little bit more humor attached to it, rather than just the news updates. So we try and push the envelope a little bit within the space.
For me, that was certainly one of the most interesting conversations that I've had on the podcast. It's incredible how much possibility there is with tax tech and how this can help us as tax professionals. I just hope that, as Alexandra suggests, that we keep moving in the right direction and that we, as a profession, stop living in the past. Show notes for this episode can be accessed at thetaxprofessionalspodcast.com/TTPP81. And all the links mentioned in this episode are included in there, including a link to Alexandra's LinkedIn profile, link to the masterclasses, and also James's contact details if you're interested in speaking to him. If you enjoyed this episode, why not subscribe? Head on over to thetaxprofessionalspodcast.com/TTPP81, where you can subscribe and sign up for email notifications. Episodes are bi-weekly and are released on Mondays. But that's it for this episode. I hope you enjoyed the episode and have taken away some useful points to help you to progress, develop, and improve your tax career. Until next time.